President Trump's speech got some high marks from viewers.
Yeah, among those who watched, 76% approved of the president's address to Congress. But then when asked how the speech made people feel about what the Trump administration will do, there was a major split among party lines. 83% of Republicans said they were optimistic, but only 24% of Democrats said they felt that way.
Okay, KCAN political reporter Bryan spent the evening fact-checking that speech and digging deeper on some of those promises made by President Trump, and so you had a day to kind of go through that. What'd you find out?
Sift through it. Well, there was a lot of strong emotion, obviously, in the speech last night, but there were plenty of loose ends. That's what we were looking at. The president's speech may have left a lot of people feeling good, or at least feeling better about his administration, but it also raised some important questions and issues. And some of those issues are related to a somber moment in last night's speech.
I just spoke to our great General Mattis just now, who reconfirmed that, and I quote, "Ryan was a part of a highly successful raid that generated large amounts of vital intelligence."
President Trump's adamant defense of a raid in Yemen that resulted in the death of Navy SEAL William Ryan Owens led to the most emotional moment of the evening, when the tears of Owens' widow overwhelmed everyone who attended and gave her a standing ovation for nearly 2 minutes, one of the longest in memory. CNN reports the Yemen raid yielded new intelligence identifying other al-Qaeda hideouts that may lead to even more raids. Documents found by the SEALs reportedly contain details about training, targeting, and explosives manufacturing by al-Qaeda. The group carried out the 2015 terrorist attack in Paris and the attempted 2009 bombing of an aircraft landing in Detroit. But another network report quoted high-ranking military officials as saying they're not aware of any useful intelligence that was produced by the raid. Nora O'Donnell asked Vice President Mike Pence about that on CBS this morning.
NBC has reported that there was no significant intelligence gathered from that raid. Is that wrong?
That is wrong. I can tell you that Secretary Mattis, as recently as yesterday, confirmed again to the administration that there was significant intelligence that was gathered that will lead to American success and to the safety and security of the American people.
But CNN reports there are serious questions about the tactics that were used in the raid, with the SEALs running straight into a firefight in which several civilians were also killed. Several military investigations are now reportedly underway to find out what actually happened and why. President Trump approved the operation after his first week in office, but he later tried to distance himself from it, blaming his military advisors and arguing it was a piece of unfinished business left over from the Obama administration.
This was a mission that was started before I got here. This was something that was, just they wanted to do. They came to see me. They explained what they wanted to do, the generals, who are very respected. My generals are the most respected that we've had in many decades, I believe. And they lost Ryan.
He was killed, I think, in the initial exchange that took place on the objective.
General Joseph Votel, the commander of U.S. forces in the Middle East, monitored the raid as Ryan was fatally wounded.
We accomplished the mission that we went there for. We certainly paid a very heavy price for this.
At a CNN town hall meeting, Senator Lindsey Graham reminded the audience that whether the raid was successful or a failure, it doesn't impact what happened to Ryan Owens.
I can promise you there have been a lot of raids in this war that were dry holes, that the enemy left an hour before we got there and some of our guys were killed. To me, they're every bit the hero. I don't know if this was a game changer in the war on terrorism. In terms of Ryan, it doesn't matter one bit. He's a hero.
President Trump's remarks on immigration have also left some folks scratching their heads. On the one hand, he said this:
I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible.
But then he said this about undocumented immigrants who have criminal records.
We are removing gang members, drug dealers, and criminals that threaten our communities and prey on our very innocent citizens.
CNN quotes an unnamed senior administration official as saying Mr. Trump's talk with news anchors this week about immigration reform was a misdirection play. meaning that administration officials fed news outlets misinformation before the president's speech to get more positive press coverage.
Let's just change gears entirely and talk about the bait and switch that the president pulled when it came to immigration yesterday.
On CBS this morning, Vice President Pence artfully dodged the questions about immigration reform.
I think, as the president said in the campaign, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. With regard to those remaining in this country, that we'll look at options, we'll engage the Congress.
Now, the CBS Evening News did some fact-checking on President Trump's claim that 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Well, it's true, but CBS found that almost 87 million of those people are either students, retired, disabled, or caring for someone at home and unavailable to work. That's why the unemployment rate in America is 4.8%. Not 40%, which it would be if all 94 million Americans were actually unemployed.
Yeah. Dave, let's go on to another topic. The president mentioned yesterday building the border wall. I think he called it the Great Wall.
The Great Wall, right.
So there are some questions that remain as to who's going to fund this. Is there any sort of kind of a tie to a loose end there?
It definitely is, no question about it. In fact, tonight the Reuters news agency reports it has seen a government document that indicates the border wall has hit a financial roadblock, even before construction has begun. Reuters says the document reveals the Department of Homeland Security has identified only $20 million that can be moved out of other projects to pay for beginning construction of the wall. The document says that's not even enough to begin construction of the wall, which is expected to cost at least $12 billion, could be as high as $20 billion. That's for all the construction. So Mexico says it won't pay for the wall. Now Homeland Security says it doesn't have the money to even begin building. Again, that's according to Reuters, and it came out tonight. Lena?
All right, Dave, thank you.